Yeah, it's been quite a journey actually. This whole thing started about 2 years ago now, and it started out as me fighting for my child to prevent her from getting cross-sex hormones, which is irreversible and sterilizes your body for life. And these minors, I don't think have any ability to consent to this kind of stuff. And that's kind of where this whole thing started. And now where we are at today is this thing has evolved into something that's about parental rights. It's about, of course, the cross-sex hormones and the Infants Act in minors. It has evolved into a whole freedom of speech issue, and that's kind of what led us here to today. Is because my freedom of speech has been so violated that at because at some point I thought this story is so important that parents, Canadians, anyone really needs to know what's going on to their children in the schools, for example, with the SOGI 123 program. And so I finally broke that silence, of course it landed me in front of the judge, Justice Tamman, uh, back in February and March, and here I am today because now I've been charged with criminal contempt charges for that breach, and I can face up to 45 days in jail for having spoken out on these matters.
The caring father who was left completely in the dark regarding crucial decisions affecting the health and identity of his child, only then to have his parental rights stripped away for caring, and then gagged from telling people about it, has found himself back in court just last week, only now he's facing prison time. Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, and I guess the 100+ convicted criminals that BC released into the public due to COVID-19 has now made enough room for the really hard threats to society, like concerned parents who try to protect their child from making life-altering decisions too soon. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want my teen to pick out a tattoo to wear for the rest of their life at age 14. And this story, among other things, is about a child making far more significant decisions than that. You may already be familiar with the entangled nightmare of this BC father who's been persecuted for parenting. He found himself being made an example of after trying to delay his child from taking experimental medical transitioning treatments, ones that can have significant side effects, including the likelihood that this child would become infertile for the rest of life. My colleague Cian Bexty did do a couple reports on this just over a year ago about the case of AB versus CD. Those are the initials we are legally obligated to use when referring to the parent-child duo. Cian was there at the courthouse where a judge ruled against the concerns of the father, leading to the mandate that the then 14-year-old teenager could seek hormone treatments without parental consent. Isn't it just great when the government raises your kids instead of you? As reported in Canadian Lawyer, a publication ban was also issued by Justice Francesca Mazzare, who banned CD from using AB's given name, referring to AB's biological female sex, and using words like she and her. Also, any attempts to convince AB to abandon the treatments. Thankfully, some of those restrictions have now been thrown out, allowing CD to be able to share his ordeal with you and I. And that ordeal now includes the government of BC coming after him for criminal contempt of court. On September 2nd, I met up with CD, his lawyer, Carey, Linde, after his court appearance. Now, people who support CD and his struggles to protect children from making decisions they may grow to regret were by his side when I arrived. This included speaker and author Lynn Tyler Thompson and transgender public speaker Jen Smith, who were also previously ordered not to share this father's struggles on their social media. Now, let's listen to CD, his counsel Carey, Linde, and others about what took place in court that day, as well as why the public needs to know about this case. CD, thanks for talking with us. How has everything been up until this point?
Yeah, it's been quite a journey actually. This whole thing started about 2 years ago now, and it started out as me fighting for my child to prevent her from getting cross-sex hormones, which is irreversible and sterilizes your body for life. And these minors, I don't think have any ability to consent to this kind of stuff. And that's kind of where this whole thing started. And now where we are at today is this thing has evolved into something that's about parental rights. It's about Of course, the cross-sex hormones and the Infants Act in minors, it has evolved into a whole freedom of speech issue. And that's kind of what led us here to today, is because my freedom of speech has been so violated that because at some point I thought this story is so important that parents, Canadians, anyone really needs to know what's going on to their children in the schools, for example, with the SOGI 123 program. And so I finally broke that silence, and of course it landed me in front of the judge, Justice Tamman, back in February and March. And here I am today, because now I've been charged with criminal contempt charges for that breach, and I can face up to 45 days in jail for having spoken out on these matters.
You know, as a parent who's going through this, what rights does a parent have to have concerns?
Okay, well, this all goes back to the Infants Act of British Columbia in Section 7. All English Commonwealth, English-speaking legal systems have something which governs guardianship. So if your parents, you're 12 years old, your parents get killed in a car accident, the public trustee is the lawful guardian. They step in and they represent you in a legal action. You can't contract. You can't do a lot of things without your guardian's consent. Now, the Infants Act was amended back in 1993 by the then Harcourt government, and it put in a section which says that a minor, somebody 18 and under, may go to a healthcare physician or a doctor and seek something. And if the doctor is of the view, that one doctor is of the view that the child is mature enough, that's the magic word, mature enough to understand what they're requesting, the doctor can do it without the consent of the guardian. And that was put in place in 1993 because a lot of minor girls wanted to get birth control and didn't want their parents to know. That's what it was for. It was never meant for this. So that's the villain in the piece. That's where you start. So that is the current law. And so a child goes to this particular endocrinologist and is told that, you probably will become infertile. That's okay, I don't ever want to have babies. What 13-year-old can do that? Young girls and my own grandchildren, as they're in their almost teens or early teens, do you think you'll ever have a boyfriend? Yeah, boys, never.
Cooties.
Yeah, so how can you possibly say that a child has the maturity to know what it means at the age of 13 or 14 or 10 or 15 to agree to be sterilized?
Now, it's my understanding you were actually put in the prisoner docket there. How was that?
Yeah, when I walked into the courtroom this morning, the attorney on the other side started out by kind of pointing me out to the sheriffs and saying that's the accused, and because they were going to seat me in the gallery, and that attorney for the government said that I needed to be in the prisoner docket. So that's how I ended up in the prisoner docket. And then my lawyer, Carey, Linde, comes in a little bit later and sees me in the prisoner's docket and is asking the judge, he's like, what is my client doing in the prisoner's docket? He's not accused, he's not a prisoner. And then eventually the lawyer for the government, admitted that it was his idea, that he was the one that had said that I need to be in there. And at some point after that, the judge did get another chair and put it beside the prisoner's docket, and that's where I sat. So today started with a little bit of drama, I guess.
And so what brought you here today? Why is it important for you to observe?
Well, because I consider this to be abuse of our children and abuse by the state who implemented the Infants Act when this child did not qualify for it. She was not of capable and sound mind, and the doctor involved, the psychologist, wrote off and submitted to the endocrinologist that she was capable, but she had a history of depression and cutting and heterosexual attraction, and it was because of an authority figure in her life that she was cutting and depressed, and that she had an attraction to, and that is the reason that was transpiring, not because she was at odds within herself, whether she was a trans person or whether she was questioning her biological sex. It was a counselor at school who had then led her down this path by showing her a video of a person transitioning. And so this poor kid all the way along has had individuals from that point on who were activists and supporting this agenda.
So where a parent suspects that the school or anybody else is trying to convince, good word, that their child is suffering from gender dysphoria. If it's a girl, it's almost 80% certain that it's rapid onset gender dysphoria, which means that there's no sign before that it's ever happened. There's no explanation for it other than the craze of teenage girls these days. Then they should talk to a lawyer quick, because it can be stopped. But you got to get it in time. You got to get it before you find out too late. Oh, my daughter's been getting hormone treatments. I didn't know that.
So with all of this, how has your relationship with your child been?
It's been kind of up and down, and the reason is simple, is that it's been a very determined effort on the other side to keep my child from me, because they know that doesn't look good for their case if my child is paying attention to me. And I can tell you, there's been many times where my child has had to sneak over in the past. She'll pretend that she's going to visit a friend that somehow lives in my neighborhood, and then she shows up at my house. She has told me that they have threatened her and said that if you go to your dad's, we're not going to support you in your desire for cross-sex hormones. And so it's just a lot of stuff that they've done, because part of the agenda is the destruction of the nuclear family and the destruction of families in general. I have heard it said that, even the government of BC here, where they're saying the biggest threat to children is their own parents. And this is where we're at right now. And I think parents need to take steps and get back control of their parental rights. And that's why I'm happy when I see guys like Derek Sloan, who just ran for the leadership of the Conservative Party, and even Dr. Leslie Lewis. And Dr. Lewis was talking about a parental rights bill. And of course, we know with Derek Sloan, he wants to run a national inquiry. He's going to be tabling that in the fall in terms of the medical transitioning of children. And that's going to include all children, foster kids, and the like, your child in the schools. And so I'm really thrilled to see some of the developments that are happening. I think the tide is changing, and I think the exposure is coming. There's light being shed on all these matters, and I hope Canadians are paying attention, and I hope they realize that we can have a conversation and we can push back and get our rights back as parents. The government has no business parenting our children, and as you can tell, they're doing an awful job because they're sterilizing them.
Here at Rebel News, we tell you the other side of the story, and AB versus CD is exactly that. This father's constitutional and parental rights have been taken away, and his side of the story has literally been banned and ignored in mainstream media. Now, if you'd like to support Rebel News in being able to continue to keep you informed about stories just like this one, please head to letusreport.com. We appreciate your support.